I'm Amanda Leitner, and welcome to Rochester Rising, where we amplify the stories of Rochester entrepreneurs. Welcome to episode 165 of the podcast today. So today we get to sit down with local innovator Christopher Brenna and talk about his nonprofit Revolutionary Earth Farms. This Rochester native runs this nonprofit with the mission to empower compassionate people to transform waste and scarcity into an ecosystem. So Revolutionary Earth Farms tackles a broad definition of waste, including waste in social systems, economic systems, and natural systems, with the goal to reduce and eliminate different forms of waste, including organic food waste, and to address scarcity issues. And they do this primarily through something called the farm. The farm is a non-traditional farm, and it's actually a collection of backyard gardens and operates in a cooperative model with produce providing for the most food insecure people in Rochester. And the overall aim of Revolutionary Earth Farms is to start a revolution from the ground up. So we have a great conversation for you on the podcast today, so stay tuned. You can find the Rochester Rising podcast and more stories of entrepreneurship in Rochester on our website at rochesterrising.org. You found our podcast in some manner, but we are on Apple Podcasts, and we're also on Spotify and on YouTube. So however you prefer to tune in, you have many options. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So check it out. But the very best way to stay up to date with all of our podcasts, all of our stories, is through our weekly newsletter through Collider. So Collider is a nonprofit of which we are the storytelling arm. So you can sign up for this weekly newsletter that comes out every Sunday morning on our website, and you'll stay up to date with all of the news and storytelling through Rochester Rising. All right, so now on to the podcast with Christopher Brenna of Revolutionary Earth Farms. Thanks for being here today on a frigid morning.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird day to be talking about gardening, I suppose.
Yeah.
Super cold out.
Yeah, it gets you in a mindset, though, for spring, and it's really not that far away when you think about it.
Yeah, and definitely we have, we know that we need to be looking ahead. Yeah. Definitely. So we, as a volunteer corps, we've already met, and we were talking about how the season's going to go, so...
We're almost there. Give it 6 more weeks, and it'll be completely different out. The parking lot won't be an ice skating rink, and
yeah, exactly. I don't even know. What did the groundhog say this year? Was it 6 more weeks of winter? I don't even know.
I think he said spring is around the corner.
Oh, well, that's good.
I believe so.
Good. Good news for me.
I can't remember. Well, I will start out by asking you, what's one of your favorite things to do with your free time here in Rochester?
Well, I've got 3 kids, and 2 of them are very active school-age kids. Zoe is 6, and Elias is going to be 5 in April, but then I also have a very, very busy little 15-month-old son named Simeon, and I'd say they take up a lot of my time at this point. Yeah. So most of it is trying to get out outdoors when it's not so freezing cold out.
Yeah.
We love to be outdoors. And so, yeah. Once upon a time, I got out on my bike a lot. Not so much lately. But
you don't bust out the fat tire or anything?
No, I don't do the fat tire thing. I'm not hip enough, I don't think. So, yeah.
It's too icy, though, too, because I run on the trails here, and some days it's not. I don't know how people on bikes do it. I'm just, intimidated enough just to run across some of the paths when they're icy and kind of get pounded down with the snow. I'm like, no, thank you.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, I don't know if I could... I don't know if my old man hips could take a fall on the ice. So, yeah.
Yeah, good to play it safe. Like you said, spring, as the groundhog said, is around the corner. So
exactly,
we have that to look forward to. So I always like to ask people too: are you from Rochester, or if not, how did you get here?
So I am native son.
Okay.
I grew up around Goose Egg Park.
Okay.
And We moved to Elton Hills when I was in junior high. So I'm kind of an Elton Hills guy. That's where we live right now. And took a little hiatus for about 15, 20 years, actually. Went to school in Duluth.
Okay.
Finished at the Maine University of Minnesota. Did some grad school and then met my wife here in Rochester. And then we moved to Milwaukee. We had been there for about 7 years. And then about 3 years ago, we came back here. So I took a long trip around the Midwest, upper Midwest, and then came back here. So
Nice.
Yeah.
I like Milwaukee. I haven't spent much time in it, but I like the rivers and just being by the water. Just a different feel.
Yeah, definitely. I've lived near 2 Great Lakes because I lived in Duluth and lived in Milwaukee. Loved Duluth. And love to go back there all the time. But yeah, Milwaukee's got a great feel. And we really enjoyed. We lived right by the lake when we lived there, so
Yeah.
It was fun. Yeah.
I always enjoy being by water. There's just something about it.
Especially one of those, a Great Lake, we call them lakes, but it's really an inland sea.
Right.
And so it is like living by the sea. And it's just a great feel. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, definitely.
So we're here to talk about Revolutionary Earth Farms. So what is the mission behind it, and what is Revolutionary Earth?
Yeah, so Revolutionary Earth is our mission is to empower compassionate people to transform waste and scarcity into an ecosystem. Now, there's a lot of big words in there with a lot of meaning behind them, but at heart, I tell people we're a waste management company, but the kind of waste that we're handling has a very broad definition. It includes social systems, economic systems, and natural systems. So we are actually trying to reduce or eliminate forms of waste that people are familiar with, organic food waste, or waste that would normally be maybe recycled. We're trying to grab those items and put them to use in our operation. But we also we look at human systems, and we look at the cycles of waste and scarcity in those systems. Everybody in Rochester wastes things. There's zero waste people in Rochester that are doing their best and doing that, but there's just a natural waste to our economy, and at the same time we have scarcity, which is kind of ironic that those two things exist together. But I wanted to create an organization that would address those two problems in our system and replace it with an ecosystem. In an ecosystem, there's waste and scarcity in an ecosystem. But over time, an ecosystem naturally tends toward equilibrium. It tends toward trying to make everything in the system contribute and flourish. And so this is the place that we start from. And the vision for the organization is to create a unified regenerative ecosystem. The way that we accomplish that and have in the last year is by focusing on what we call the farm. And it's not a farm, of course, in the traditional sense, because we don't have that. We don't have the big red barn. We don't have the how many acres on the edge of town. Our farm is a collection of backyard gardens that we collectively refer to as our farm. It's a cooperative endeavor. We share resources across those locations, and all the produce from that farm goes to providing for the people that we have chosen to serve, which is the most food insecure people in Rochester. So.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people don't really think about food insecurity. Like you said, you have this interesting dichotomy where you have a lot of waste. I think about it all the time when you're, having dinner or whatever, and, you have all this food left over, or not a lot, but you normally have some, and most people just throw it away. But a lot of us, I think, don't think about food insecurity. So, what is food insecurity? What does the state of that look like in Rochester? What defines a food insecure individual, and then how did they find you?
Yeah, so food insecurity is a looming health crisis in Rochester, is how I would put it. We have 40% of children in the public school system that are on free or reduced lunch. And it's not a secret that there's actually a collective debt that is pretty sizable that people are trying to address when it comes to school lunches. Mm-hmm. Lots of kids in our system, the best meal that they're going to get is when they're at school. And so when we talk about food insecurity, we're talking about people that either don't know where their next meal is going to come from, or they're surviving on an amount of food or a quality of food that is nutritionally insufficient. And I can tell you that we have an experience of dealing with food insecurity from our experience of last year. We set out to grow as much food as we could in the yards that were donated to our mission. And in mid-August, my wife said, well, are we going to distribute this food? That was part of the vision that I set out, was that we would be a kind of year-round home delivery CSA for food insecure people. The year-round part I knew was going to take a couple of years and probably still will. The home delivery part I didn't think we would do in the first year because I didn't think we'd have the capacity for it. And in August, like I said, my wife asked me, well, what are we going to do with this food? I was working with other local food charities that do distribution. Mm-hmm. And so we were getting the produce out to people that really need it. But that vision of home delivery was something that I wasn't convinced we could do. My wife decided to prove me wrong, and she did. She reached out into the community, and the people that we focused on the most were people that had mobility issues. So we are looking for the people that are food insecure, because in part because they can't even get to Channel 1, mm-hmm. or they can't even get to the sources of food that are offered by food distribution charities and things like that. So we really found a small group of people. We started out with 2 deliveries the first week. We delivered for 11 weeks, and we ended with 14 households that we delivered to, which was over 60 people.
That's awesome.
It was a great feeling. We had a lot of fun. I'm really glad that my wife had a little more faith than I did. So, yeah.
Sometimes you just have to prove that it can be done, right?
Exactly.
Just by doing it.
Yes.
Instead of thinking about it. No, I
Yes.
get that. But yeah, it just adds another level of complexity to what you're doing.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah.
So then you talked about it a little bit. So you're mainly volunteer-based with people helping you do these things, and then land that's donated, right? People's yards. So I guess the first part, are you needing volunteers now, and in what capacity? And then if people have, how does donating your yard work, and what are kind of the requirements for that?
Well, I can answer the yard part first, and then I can talk about the volunteers. The strange thing last year was that I thought that the biggest challenge was going to be finding land. I thought it was the biggest ask, was to ask people, will you let me come and just take over your yard and turn it into a garden? It sounds outlandish and kind of maybe borderline insane. And so asking people to take the plunge and do that, it seemed like it was going to be the biggest ask. And the only part of the system where I thought I surely will need money for this was I thought I would have to rent a license basically to use people's backyards. I turned down over 20 acres last year of offers because we didn't have the capacity, we didn't have the people power to match what we were being given. And another issue that arose was just that for what we're trying to do, not all land is as suitable as other pieces of land. We've come to realize that the best kind of land for us is an established neighborhood, a single-family home that has a backyard that's roughly something like 2,000 square feet or 3,000 square feet or so. And we find that we get a lot of value out of that yard because it's in an established neighborhood. Volunteers can come and go under circumstances that the homeowner approves, obviously. But there's an energy to an established neighborhood that seems to fit with our mission. The kinds of land that we just can't at this time do a lot with is the peri-urban land that's on the edge of the city, something where somebody has 5 or 6 or 8 or 10 acres on the edge of town, and they would like to give us sometimes, 3 or 4 acres of that land. For a lot of different reasons, we can't do a lot with that kind of land because it is on the edge of town. It's sometimes in a neighborhood where there's lots of people who want to be left alone, and that makes sense. And they have purchased that amenity, I guess, as part of living in that neighborhood. And so the idea of having lots and lots of cars driving through their neighborhood and volunteers coming into that kind of neighborhood,
just not attractive to those people.
Yeah. And we don't really need to ruffle any feathers when we have great offers of land that are in these established neighborhoods. When there's more density, it means that more of our volunteers are closer to the action.
So you're looking for land or primarily in Rochester, and I guess just in Rochester, because once you get further out, for your volunteers to get there, it gets tricky.
Yeah, and it makes a lot more sense. It's a lot more natural and acceptable for a volunteer to park on a urban street, get out, go into somebody's backyard, start working on the vegetable garden. Whereas on the edge of town, that might be cause for concern for some of the neighbors.
Yeah, so even if you donate your yard or a portion of your yard, you don't necessarily have to take care of it, basically. Volunteers come and do that, so you wouldn't have to worry about that if you had land to spare.
Yeah, basically we have 4 different categories of volunteer in our organization. We have stewards, and that's what we call our homeowners because they're sort of watching over this part of our farm for us, and they're graciously donating the use of it. They, like you said, they don't have to work on the garden if they don't want. Some of them do. Some of them absolutely don't touch it at all. Homeowners, stewards, get a weekly box along with our food insecure subscribers. So they can either get a box delivered back to their house, or they can just basically go into their backyard and pick what they like. We do have occasional volunteers and people that come out to help. They enjoy gardening. They want to do something good. That's sort of our second category, is just sort of the general volunteer. They come out because they enjoy it. They are not included on the CSA list. We do have a sort of a more committed version of volunteer called a work-share member. And they actually commit to putting 50 hours of work into the farm in the year. So a little less than about an hour a week on average. Obviously, we don't have people, there's not a lot to do right now, so more of it will be concentrated into the summer and the growing season. But the work-share members work for a CSA box, a weekly produce box, along with the subscribers. And then our last category is the subscriber, the food insecure subscriber. We don't ask anything of them. We would never charge them money for the service that we're providing, and we don't. We are very assiduous in protecting their privacy. They are free to participate in the service for as long as they need it and want it. And the great thing about these four categories is that we've already seen what I would call cross-pollination. We've already started to see stewards who want to essentially do a work-share amount of work. We've seen work-share people that have decided, I want to be a steward. We've seen definitely lots of volunteers say, I want to commit to going up to this work-share amount of work. And we've had subscribers say, I want to volunteer, or I want to do work-share. So we're hoping that over time, the lines between these categories of volunteer will sort of get blurred. Because we want to be a community of people that are trying to solve this problem of food insecurity together, but also benefit from the other things that we provide, which is hyper-local food movement that builds resilience in our community, that reduces our carbon footprint as a community. Things that basically transform the way that we see food and how we get it and where we should get it, and the standard for what that food is. Right now, if you want lettuce, there's a couple of great local greenhouse growers in southeastern Minnesota. But if you go to the grocery store, what's probably going to be on the shelf is a clamshell full of spinach or lettuce or something like that has traveled 1,200 miles from Los Angeles County. It has been doused in chlorine and triple washed. It has probably been sitting somewhere else for a little less than a week before it arrives in the grocery store. It may sit there for another week, and then you take it home and try and eat it. We have an organizational standard that we deliver whatever we harvest within 24 hours to the person that's going to eat it. So hyper local means the freshest we can get. And we are sort of upending the expectations for who should get that kind of food by offering it to the people that are in the they're least likely or least able to actually procure that kind of food. So
yeah, we're all, I won't say all of us, a lot of us are completely removed and are thinking about where our food comes from and understanding that journey and that process and why things grown locally and smaller are more expensive, just because they have to be because of the cost of production. So yeah, I agree. A lot of us don't have any idea where our food actually comes from, and what has been done to it before it gets on the shelf, and there's a reason why it stays fresh for however long
Right.
it does, which is terrifying.
Yeah.
Always when I have bread out on the counter for like 3 weeks and nothing happens to it, I'm like,
Right.
huh,
Yeah.
I don't know if I should be eating this
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. What's going on with that bread?
Right.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you.
It's a terrifying,
Yeah.
terrifying concept. So why are you passionate about this kind of initiative and endeavor in utilizing resources, addressing food insecurity? What value do you find in that?
Well, so when I started Revolutionary Earth last year, I chose to have worked with actually a fellow collider, Jan.
Okay.
Hagenbrook. He actually created a logo with me, and I think I really I maybe added a few gray hairs to Jan's head because I sort of asked him to create a logo that in some ways breaks the rules for what logos should look like nowadays. I asked him for something that a child could draw from memory. I asked him for something that where the colors actually mattered. I know with logo branding, you want the logo to be able to be any color, and like that's the apple, right? From Mac, that could be any color, and we know it's Macintosh. But I asked him for a symbol that also broke the rules of gardening organizations, landscaping organizations, and businesses. The color you're supposed to use for that is
Green.
Green. Yeah, you're supposed to use green. And the job that I gave to Jan was red, white, and blue. And that is the value, the set of values that I draw on to get people committed to this endeavor. I am asking us to take these really familiar values that we all have a different orientation to, but on some level we know, and we know that it's part of our story, that we began life as a revolutionary people with revolutionary values that we can definitely list off. We know what they are: liberty, unity, compassion, which in the language of the French Revolution was fraternity. That's a different idea now, fraternities, but that's what it was. It was the idea of brotherhood or compassion for your fellow man, and then equality. And so I asked Jan to create this logo that expressed all of it, and I gotta say he nailed it. But I wanted to take those ideas, liberty and compassion, unity and equality, and reorient what they mean, how we engage with those ideas. And so in our mission statement are actually two of those qualities. When we talk about empowerment, that's what we are talking about. We're talking about liberty or liberation. And I want to liberate people from a system that tells them that they have to waste things and that they have to accept that there are other people in the system and animals and just structures that are in need and lack things. And we've been told that we should accept that. And I want to liberate people from that thinking and give them opportunities to be compassionate. So that's, and I think that way of being oriented toward the values that founded our revolution is a way of creating a new revolution. lots of the founding fathers believed that this country should be in constant revolution, that there should always be a new revolution bubbling up from the ground. And I think there's always a revolution coming from the earth. And ultimately, that's kind of our tagline, is that we want to start a revolution from the earth up. Mm-hmm. And so that's, for me, that's the value I see in creating an organization that it's sometimes almost maybe a little kitschy to evoke the values of the American Revolution and the French Revolutions. And there's a lot of baggage there, too, because
Sure.
we certainly didn't have in some ways we had a successful revolution, but we also did a lot of damage to a lot of, definitely the American Indian populations that were here, and definitely our original sin is slavery. And so, yeah, there's baggage, but do we then discard those values, or can we find new meaning in them? And to me, I wanted something that was universal enough in the American experience that we could kind of hitch our sail to. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, and I think, like you were talking about, that awareness that you're not the only one in the system, whether it's the food system, whether it's animals, people who don't have as much of you or have access to food like you do. And just thinking about all of that, and fresh foods, we have food islands, food insecurity, people who have to eat things out of cans, and, that's not a good, healthy experience either. So that awareness,
Right.
is just so important, that everyone's experience isn't the same.
Yeah, and that, liberty definitely gets defined in the revolution as that which you're at liberty to do without impeding on the experience of someone else. And that's sort of a paraphrase of a lot of the expressions of liberty that the founding fathers gave us. And what it can tend to create is, well, what it has created for us, rows upon rows of houses, the private property of individuals or families. And the tendency in that system is to protect one's own freedom, the freedom to own land or live in your own house, against the freedoms of others, and not to impinge upon other people's freedom. And that is what it is. That is a definition of liberty that creates a particular situation. What I have found, and what I did find last year, was that when you give someone the opportunity to take that thing that our country says, this is your right, private property right, and say, will you donate the use of this to help others? Will you engage your compassionate impulse? People, I have seen the liberation that takes place on someone's face when they are given that opportunity, and people jump at it because it's just a slight change in orientation about viewing one's own landscape that has a tremendous power to it. And I didn't know that was what was going to happen. But it is definitely, for the people that have donated their backyards, it has been a universal experience. Mm-hmm. So.
We have some final questions to take us to the end here. So, kind of random, but what are you reading or listening to right now?
So, I don't want to frighten anybody that's listening, but because first of all, it's going to sound really nerdy, and second of all, I'm going to use a word that sounds scary. I'm reading a 19th century German social anarchist.
Okay.
Right now, I'm reading his political theories, and social anarchy in modern parlance, if you described what it's trying to do, most people would think, "Oh, that sounds nice," involving more people, average people, in making really significant decisions about the way that their local economy or governance actually goes. Most people nowadays would refer to it as, grassroots democracy or something like that. See, I'm reading that right now, and then I just finished reading the story of the guy who, Scott Harrison, I think is his name. He started Charity Water.
Okay.
And I love some of the aspects of the model of how he started his nonprofit. So, and it was kind of an interesting story to read as well. So,
sure, it has a lot of parallels for what you're thinking about too. I'm
hoping so. There's some aspects of how he actually runs his donor campaigns that's really, really fascinating and really neat. So, and then I read tons and tons of kids' books. 200 a week. I suppose so. Yeah. So, yeah.
What is your favorite spot in Rochester?
Ooh, that's hard. Because there's the coffee scene here that's a great game right now. It's steadily improving. So I'm excited about that. I don't know if you know, but Milwaukee has this great local coffee scene.
I did not know that. I guess it makes sense.
Yeah, well, they're definitely known
cold.
For yeah.
They're more known for beer and cheese.
Yeah, right. Beer and cheese. Yep, they're good at those things too. But we got kind of spoiled when we were in Milwaukee because the coffee scene there. I mean, just local roasters and everything all over the place. I was just at Cafe Steam, the Broadway location. I like that one. I kind of like the older, more like the hardwood floor.
The older spaces.
Yeah, the older kind of thing for a coffee shop. I like there's a little bit more warmth. I like the new Cafe Steam at One Discovery Square, but it is kind of
totally
industrial.
Different feel.
Yeah,
totally different feel. And there's different people in there. If you notice, there's a very different crowd in one.
Yeah, for sure.
The other, which is interesting because it's the same things.
Yeah, it's the same coffee, right? Yeah.
I think there might be some small changes, some different to the menus, but it's all the same.
Yeah, but so I would say probably Cafe Steam. I was in Fiddlehead the other day. It's got a great scene, and I love that. And they, so I mean, for me, a good coffee shop where I can have a great conversation with somebody. That's where I'd like to be. So,
what's one local resource that's been really useful for helping to move your nonprofit forward?
This might be a surprising answer, but do you know Nextdoor?
I don't.
It's an app that.
Oh, I do. Okay.
So it's kind of like a Facebook for neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe not quite like that, but a lot of people use it for garage sales or, here I've got stuff on my curb. Somebody come and get it if you want it, that sort of thing. I actually found several of the homeowners that wanted to donate land through Nextdoor. And Nextdoor is a crazy place for if you put on there and just say, anyone have shovels? Anyone have a shovel they're not using? 15 people come out of the woodwork and just say, I've got a shovel. I've got a whole supply shed full of tools that you can have.
That's really interesting. So I know what it is because I got a flyer about it maybe like a year ago. So it's super hyper local, like your couple block radius, or how does that work?
It's like neighborhoods. So
okay.
So
it's
like Elton Hills
defined.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm not sure how they define it, but
they
maybe take a cue from our neighbors or something like that. But
yeah.
Okay. But it's great for figuring, just getting, because that's for us, we really want waste products. We want to be able to transform them. So for us, we have a kind of a hierarchy of things of how we want to acquire an asset. The least desirable would be money to buy a shovel, for example. More desirable would be getting the shovel,
right?
Like a new shovel from the store. Even more desirable from that is getting a shovel that someone is going to either throw away or not use. So we are always constantly trying to find, these parts of the system where there's assets that are just not being utilized, or they're being seen as kind of a mild liability. And that's ultimately the backyard. Lots of people, they just, I hate to mow it. I never go back there. I have to keep it free of dandelions or my neighbors are going to browbeat me. And when you can turn something that's like that, like a mild liability, and say, hey, if you donate this, it's going to go to a good cause and it's going to really help people. That people love that switch. It's just great. So.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to know if things are going to use, and being of use.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll have to check that app out now more.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I bet it's different depending on what neighborhood you're part of. But the Eldon Hills one got kind of heated because of they wanted to do the lane changes.
Yeah.
So
I think mine would be pretty lame. It's not. There's really not much going on in where I live in Rochester. Although I might be surprised.
You never know. Someday maybe there'll be some hot button issue.
There could be. Yeah. Well, I will wrap up by asking you for any final thoughts and where people can find you, find out more about Revolutionary Earth Farms. Yeah.
So we are. You can find us at revolutionaryearth.org. If you put in your / and type in Workshare, you'll get to the Workshare landing page, and that'll can describe what we're doing for Workshare and what the responsibility would be and what you get out of it, that sort of thing. We are nearing capacity for the number of Workshare people that we could actually use this year. If you want to donate your backyard, we do have an application process because we have so many people asking. So, you just go to the website and there's a little drop down. You can say donate your lawn, and somebody will contact you about that. If you are a low-income person or a food insecure person and you would like to see about becoming a subscriber, you can go to revolutionary.org/subscribe, and you can get sign up on our email list, and somebody will contact you about that. We're on Facebook at Revolutionary Earth, and we are on Instagram. We tried tweeting, and it didn't just...
Yeah.
It just didn't.
I'm not a huge fan of Twitter as well.
Yeah. The gardening scene or the food access scene on Twitter is pretty
slim.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, it's good for some things, not so much for others.
Yeah. So.
Well, thanks so much for being here today and for your time and talking about warmth and growing on a cold February day.
Yes.
So
can't wait to get my hands in the dirt, and I will admit to being a hobbit farmer. When I am out in the gardens, I never found a pair of shoes that I've been okay with wearing, because I just don't like when they get wet and dirty and muddy and stuff like that, and then I have to clean them.
Toes in the earth.
Yeah, so I just take my shoes off, and man, I love it. I love the connection. So I can't wait to do it. I can't really do it right now, but
no, not yet. Apparently 6 more weeks, so we'll see.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for the conversation today.
Thanks.
A big thanks to Chris for coming in and sharing his story about Revolutionary Earth Farms. So you can find out more about them at revolutionaryearth.org or on Facebook and Instagram, and you can find the links to those in our show notes. If you know of a great entrepreneur that would be an amazing guest for the podcast, let us know and send us an email at rochesterrising@gmail.com. That's a wrap for the show today. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen in to your podcast content so that you never miss a story of entrepreneurship and innovation coming out of Rochester, Minnesota. We'll see you here next week with a brand new episode.